Welcome, magical mages, spiritual sages, and all of you in the audience. Thank you for being here. So excited to be sharing these ideas with you, and I'm so grateful that you've allowed me into your life and have been listening to the podcast. It's exciting, it's fun. I feel the energy of the etheric network building up, and we are going to be creating a network of light and love and power. I'm excited and happy. So today I wanted to continue. In episode 18, I introduced the concept of the 7 Immortal Soul Lines. And I want to expand a little bit on each one of those lines so that you can get a little broader perspective on each line and see if you think you fit into one of these. Now, I won't go into detail about how these came about because I covered some of that in the previous episode, but just a real brief recap. And that is that this kind of download of information came into me several years ago now about how we carry a spiritual lineage, similar to the way that we carry physical lineage and DNA markers, and that this spiritual lineage follows our souls from incarnation to incarnation, or our entire soul journey. And that this particular type of energy that we pick up from in spiritual ways, in magical ways, ties in more to what motivates us to use our soul energy, what motivates and drives us to discover magic or to utilize spiritual gifts. Rather than let's say in the physical DNA world, we might inherit certain tendencies. We might get allergies. We might have, physical attributes, long legs, curly hair, whatever the case may be that comes from our physical DNA inheritance. But this spiritual DNA is more about our gifts and our spirit, and it's an accumulation of our soul's lessons and journey as we've progressed on our soul's journey. And I have this theory that we may do this because we spend time when we are born as souls. We may have our own unique things right from that very moment that we resonate to stronger than other things. And as we journey, as we move along on our soul's journey, we may gravitate to those things that we have affinities for and that brings us pleasure, brings us joy, or fulfills our particular soul's destiny. And so by going to places or being with beings and species that can help us learn the skills that we have innately, inbred into our soul, a very fabric, the essence of ourselves, this energy builds up, and we get a stronger and stronger, not only in ability regarding these things, but we maybe are even more gravitate to these things even stronger because the energy gets bigger over time, until we find ourselves, quite entrenched, and not in a negative way, but in a happy way, quite affiliated with a particular style of spiritual work. And so that's the premise that lies behind the whole 7 Immortal Soul Lines. Now, again, too, we are very complex. Each of us has so many parts, moving parts, obviously, that it's impossible to generalize any person in a way and, narrow someone down to a category. And I certainly understand that. But what we're doing here is we're going to begin together to build our magical persona. This is what I call it. And we'll have a whole podcast, maybe more than one, just talking about the importance of a magical persona. And so this is one of the exercises that goes into creating, building, and sustaining a magical persona is determining your primary and secondary, even tertiary soul line. And so it's a fun exercise, and it brings out some introspection, like you have to go inside a little bit and ask questions of yourself to see where do you resonate and how do you truly use your spiritual powers. And some people haven't even given it much thought. And so it's kind of a new way to do that. Others of you are so so familiar with how you use your talents and your gifts. And so this is just maybe an additional exercise for those of you who are very confident in how you want to proceed using your spiritual and magical powers. So we had the 7 of them, and we talked about also how each one is aligned with one of the chakras in the body. And this just tends to be in a physical dimension where you're given a physical body. Those in different dimensions, they're different, but you end up with energy centers on a physical plane. And so for us right now as earth humans, we have these basic 7 chakras. I realize there are more, but these are the ones that correlate most closely with the physical body. And so these talents and these inherited spiritual markers, they tend to express themselves once you're back in a physical domain. They tend to express themselves through accumulated energy at one or more of these chakra centers. So this is another clue sometimes as to which line you have. You may have a lot of trouble physically in the physical plane with one of these areas because it's blocked and it's trying and trying to get open, and it may be causing you physical illness, or it may be an area that you have a lot of strength in, and it's a very healthy area for you. So it can show up either way, and I think it kind of gives you a clue as to what is going on with regards to your physical body and what your purpose may be in this particular incarnation to your spiritual lineage. All right, so we talked about the chakras, we talked about how each one aligns, and just briefly we'll run through them. The root chakra is the Immortal Vampire line. The sacral or second chakra is the Eternal Artisan line. The third chakra, sometimes referred to as the solar plexus, we classify that as the healer, the physical healer line. The fourth chakra, the heart chakra, is the priest and priestess, beloved priest and priestess line. The next one up is the throat chakra, and that we identify in this little system of ours as the visionary messenger line. The next one up is the sixth chakra, often referred to as the third eye, and we call that the mystical shaman. And then the last one is the crown chakra, and we refer to that as the magi alchemist. So we're going to break these up a little bit to discuss more about each one. And for today's episode 19, we're going to talk about the lower 3. So we'll start with that one in the center of our body, that solar plexus. And that is affiliated with the color gold or golden yellow. And it sits a little bit above your belly button, usually right in that area. And we consider that the honored healer center. So healers. All right, don't we all wish we could be as talented as some of the healers. Now, I believe that all of us have each one of these gifts and can work with all these gifts. There's no law that says that, oh, you can't heal. No, absolutely not. But for the purpose of identifying yourself in one of these lines, you will feel a stronger draw to one or more of them. You will know yourself when you hear it. When you hear the description or read the description, by the way, they're all listed for you on our site, modernmasters.org, and you can go to, just scroll down on the first page and you'll see a button that says Immortal Soul Lines. If you go there, all the soul lines are briefly discussed, and if you want to read more, it takes you to a page where you can even download a PDF about each soul line. So there's quite a bit of information there. All right, so back to the healer. As I said before on the last episode, healers very often know that they're healers early in life. This is one of the signs that people either kind of feel like, yep, that's my dominant, that's me, or they're like, well, I wish I could be that more. I wish I could heal more, or I do it a little, but it's not what I am able to do easily. It's not my dominant line. So usually this is one that's very recognizable to those who feel a close affinity to the physical healer line. And it shows up because they are able to, even from very early ages, sometimes they'll have an animal that's hurt and they'll just put their hands on that animal, and in just a matter of minutes, they can tell the animal feels better. Some in early years develop a close relationship to plants. and they can heal or just make plants bloom as compared to other people who we struggle, like me, with plants. No, I'm about the middle there. Sometimes I do pretty well with them, and other times it's a challenge. But these healers, the energy just radiates on the physical plane. And so they're very drawn to actually relieving actual physical issues, pain, disease, disorders, discomforts that affect physicality. So this is the distinguishing mark here, and there because there are other types of healers. These precious honored healers have this true gift of reaching out. Some of them have taken you guys that are healers have studied various modalities, and some of these include distance healing, energy healing, just working with sound, color, rituals. So this, there's no limit on how a healer may work. Some feel very comfortable in one modality, like Reiki, for example, and others are just fine doing distance healing. So it's very individual again. But the focus of these people and this soul line is all about healing. Now, some downsides. Well, the healer tends to be fairly empathic. So now all of us could be empaths and yet have a completely different focus, have a different soul line affinity. So there isn't just one of the soul lines that falls into the empath category. But healers often have probably a higher percentage of empaths. They share this with the one above in the emotional healer range, and maybe that's because they're here to fulfill a purpose as a healer, and so they are gifted with the ability to sense who might need their help. Now, this is a wonderful gift, but as many of you know and have even mentioned to me, it's a curse as well, isn't it? Because without learning how to properly construct shields and filters and things that will help you so that the general public, the things that people go through doesn't overwhelm you as an empath, that requires some practice and some skill. And so until that is built up, healers can be one of the soul lines that is more frequently affected by the downside of empathy because they always feel it, and it is such a compelling, it compels them to go out and help those that they sense need their help. And for this reason, sometimes healers of all kinds, any style, will develop maybe, let's call them a little bit inappropriate or misaligned ways to protect themselves. In other words, they might stay home a lot because they just fear the effects of crowds or the effects of a person they could run into overloading their system. They may even retreat from their gift because it just seems to demand too much from them. I know that it can take some skill sometimes for healers to learn where that source of healing is coming from and work with it in such a way that it channels through them rather than them giving up their personal energy to help somebody. So there's various skills that the healer needs to learn and excel in order to be as healthy as they're really meant to be themselves. A lot of times healers themselves really suffer with a lot of health problems because they are giving so much of their energy that they're draining from their own core, from their own health systems in order to help others. So you get certain kinds of misalignments with each of the soul lines, and these are a couple that happen with the healers. They also might even do things like, in an effort to buffer themselves from the world, they might even actually give their body permission subconsciously to gain weight, and this extra weight kind of fools the subconscious, like I have a big buffer around me, no one can get to me, no one can hurt me. I have this extra stuff on me that protects me. So again, a lot of us could do this, not just healers, but we see it very often in healers. And I think it's because there's such a strong empathy. There are so many channels that healers have opened up to others. And this is why we see this a lot. And so we'll get into details about working with each of these signs. And on the site, we'll be offering exercises and things for specific signs to follow and do. So this is upcoming, and we're excited to be bringing that too. So that's a little bit more about healers. The color yellow and gold. I think things that healers are drawn to very often is the sun. They have a natural affinity with the daylight and the life-giving attributes of sunshine and warmth. Again, you could find healers of all sorts. Everyone's individual. So these are just kind of general things that we might see. But in general, physical healers, they very often are very comfortable in the daytime hours where the sun is shining bright, and they receive energy from the sun and the sunlight. So that color and that association with gold and all the sunlight tones is no accident. That really helps feed the healer. And whether they like nature or whether they like office work, that doesn't matter. They still do receive their energy from daylight hours, and most healers you'll find tend to be kind of the morning person type. Now, maybe not real early morning, because as I say, they have recuperation periods that they need to take as a result of the healings that they have done, and all the more so if they have not refined their techniques, if they've drained themselves in the process of healing. So I'm not saying that, oh, these are the, up at 5 a.m. people. No, but they do tend to be daytime people in general, again. So that's a little bit about the healer. I guess we'll leave it there for now, and move down to the second chakra, the sacral chakra, kind of in the womb area, the middle abdomen, lower abdomen area. And this is what we associate and call the Eternal Artisan chakra center. So this is for creation and creators. And of course, the womb is a good representation of this. But of course, it doesn't matter. The gender doesn't matter at all, because all people we love to create. This is not unique to this soul line by any means, because we are all here to learn how to be creators in one way or another. So this is central to all of us. But where it becomes different for the Eternal Artisan, those truly tied and truly associated with that line, that soul line, the way it differs is that they just need to feel creative daily. I mean, this is just something that fills their life, or else they don't feel alive. For many of us, we love to create, and we need to learn how to create, and it feeds our souls. But we could maybe go days or weeks in other directions and not feel that we're not living. It wouldn't necessarily hit us that strongly if we took a break from a large creative activity. Now, for the Eternal Artisan, it's very different. They feel a creative expression. Just they wake up with the push for that to happen in their days and their evenings, whatever style they are. Now, of course, this line, as we mentioned in the prior broadcast, is that this line can include all the things you would think of as artisans, special crafters, dancers, musicians, actors and actresses, anything in the performing arts, anything that we just typically think of, sculptors, painters. All right. But this line includes all kinds of creators. So you could think of architects this way. You could even go in and think of planners like city planners or coders or engineers. They're designing you. So this includes designers, the interior designer, even the creative chef, who's just fascinated with creating foods, and also the nurturing aspect that goes with cooking, how you create these foods and then you give them to those you love, or you share them with the world in one way or another. And so then there's the idea of even those that would want to start a business. The business becomes their baby. Excuse me. The business is the creation. Giving life to something like a business is found deep in this eternal artisan zone. And then that just is, beside, and parenting and being a pet owner and the things where you create something, and then you bring it into your life and you nurture it and you create a world for whatever it is you've created. If you're a parent of children, you might have a strong interest in their education and maybe homeschool them, or have follow up with them and their talents and encourage their creativity, piano lessons, dance lessons, sports, this very holistic approach to where creativity is just seeping into every moment of every day. All right, so this is the Eternal Artisan line, and it includes things like crafts, like building homes, or specialty workers like those that make knives, work forges. All this falls in there. If it's this daily drive to do these things, then this falls into this soul line. And how they bring about their magic. And thank goodness for them, because they receive inspiration. Now, some artists are more spiritually and magically inclined than others, of course, and some will really attribute their works to inspiration, and others might not go that far, but it's truly happening for all of them, whether they're aware of it or not. They may receive dreams about what their next painting looks like, or promptings on a new way to start a business or to invent something. Inventors would fall into this category as well. And so it does come, their dreams and their visions for what they want to create actually do come from higher realms. They come from their higher selves and other higher dimensions. And then what they do as artisans is they create those things and they bring them into our world for us to share and enjoy, and it uplifts us. Much of their art, their music, their designs, their inventions have helped the human race emotionally and even physically in many cases. So this is the bridge between a kind of inspiration that comes in it, and an idea that lands on the artisan, and then the desire to share that idea on some level. Some are more shy, and they shared their works with just friends and family, of course. And others are much more open to sharing it with whoever, sharing it with the rest of the world. So that varies. Now, the artisan is often with all this incoming inspiration and ideas that just flood their system, they can develop frustration, both when it's overloaded and they get so many ideas that they can't squeeze them out as fast as they're coming in, and also when they go through cycles where the ideas don't seem to be coming, like a writer in the writer's block. They just they can get into some pretty down and negative cycles when they feel cut off from whatever usually feeds them. And so this can produce certain kinds of cycles that are emotional that some of the other lines may not experience quite as much, because for the artisan to be healthy and functioning and truly living out their best and highest, achieving their goals in their highest way, in the manner that they should be, they need to be receiving this flow, and then that flow needs to be moving through them and come out from them into their works of art or works any kind of work or creation that they produce. So when that flow stops for the artist, and it does, it comes and goes and there's cycles, that's just part of life, it brings a lot of emotion. So this is sometimes why we have the idea of the artist with, ups and downs and depressions and dark times and all this. That is a generalization again, of course. But I will say that it occurs because that flow is so critical and so important to the artist or the creator that when that flow is interrupted, which happens, it causes emotional reaction. And so if the artist is aware of this ahead of time, there's so much that can be done that can compensate for the flow and even it out a bit. And again, we're going to be talking more and more details for each line so that you can really get some good exercises just specific to your needs and what you resonate to the most. But we do often see this with artists. Now, as far as artists and their schedules, they are all over the map because what happens to the artist or the creator is their true gift, that inherent gift to bring something into the world that's based on a vision. Once they're absorbed in doing that, the hours can just fly by. They can jump into a project and not come up for air for weeks on end or work through the night, and then they need to rest and sleep in the day, at absolute exhaustion points. So we see more erratic schedules in the artisan line quite a bit. So they just don't match. They're not the same as these physical healers that we just went over, who tend to be daytime people in general. Again, the artisan is just very fluid and very reactive to what is happening at the time for them. Now, that is not to say that you couldn't be an eternal artisan and have a very, very regular schedule. Because if you are someone like an engineer or a city planner or someone like that, and you are working, then that puts you onto a different schedule. But I have to predict that in the artisan's case, somewhere along the line, a very personal inspiration or vision is going to hit you. And that will throw that schedule off when that does. That just happens. It happens to all of us. All right, so let's move. And of course, the color is orange and warmth. And anything that this fire, that when you look into a fire and it's warming you and it's providing you with food, it's actually fire really contributes, doesn't it, to sustenance and the creation of things that will keep us all alive. And so it's very symbolic, and it matches up with the artisan energy. All right, let's drop to the root chakra. And this chakra is associated with the color red, a nice deep red. And it's healthiest when beautiful reds are circulating in this area. And we call this the Immortal Vampire line. And I know it is a word that can frighten certain people, but that's what we want to stop. We want to be able to define the vampire in such a way that it becomes much more holistic and understandable. The reason we're sticking with the vampire word, not changing it, is that like the healers, vampires identify themselves quite early. And in our culture, they have become accustomed to using the word vampire for themselves. So it wouldn't be fair to take this word away, because this is how they find out about this extra information about their soul line, is to keep it named vampire so they can find it and they can read about it and learn about it. So those of you out there who identify as a vampire, and there's several kinds, and we won't be going into that detail on this particular podcast, but we will in a future podcast. And I'm fully aware of the sanguine and the psi and the sexual and just so many different types of vampires. And some of the writers have contributed just worlds of information to the vampire culture and to those of you who identify as a vampire. But what I want to add to this is that I want to share with you our interpretation of what the vampire's true gifts are spiritually and psychically and magically. So what vampires are really good at is they can take energy off of sentient beings, whether that's plants or animals or humans, all three they can actually take energy from. Now, whether they're actually taking life force um, versus another type of energy can be questionable and debated, but oftentimes it is associated with actual life force or chi, and they can drain this energy off the person in various ways. Each type of vampire works differently, and there are many vampires that don't realize they're vampires. I'm sure many of you have friends that would fall into this category. And every time you're around that person, you just feel drained when they leave. Now, this can happen with anybody occasionally, but when it's the same person over and over and over, what is probably happening is that person is probably a psychic vampire and doesn't even know it. Okay. And so when they're communicating with you, you're giving them access to your energy, and they actually feel better as they absorb energy off of you and let themselves take it into their energy system. And because it's so natural for all humans to gravitate towards pleasure and help ourselves if we can, most of us, this just happens to them naturally. And so they may not be aware that they're doing this yet, but there are many of those style vampires that are in the world. Many, many. So they take this energy from living things, and they that's where kind of the dramas that you see, that's kind of where they stop. Now, some actually drink blood and they absorb life force through the blood. So again, it's just another method. Basically, there's more details than that, but just to sum it up a little bit, they're absorbing life force. And it goes with the legends that they live forever, because if you had a source that you could just keep refilling your own life force with, that would extend your life. Right. So this is where these legends come from. Also, I believe there are immortals on our world, but that's another subject for another day. So anyway, back to the vampire life. Now, what I believe is that vampires have been gifted with this ability. And for those that choose to really refine their skills and become aware of ways they can use this ability, I have two friends that are vampires and know they are, and they are two of the best healers that I've ever met, because what they do is they are able to bring this energy in and then they can give it back out. Vampires can even clean energy. They can bring energy in, clean it up, and send it back out. They're just energy transmitters and energy transmutators. I don't know if that's a word, but it works. They transmute energy. And so they bring this in and they can choose a target to send that energy back to. And I have been directly healed by two living vampires and one that is in an etheric state. And so you would never normally associate vampire with healer, but I have personally experienced this, and it just is one way to go that goes to show that the vampire skill, the innate vampire ability of absorbing energy and working with that energy and deciding how to use it, can be used in a variety of ways. It's a much broader and wider set of skills, really, than is generally thought of. And yes, many in the movies or the books, they're always using it for themselves, but this is not always the case. There are also ways to drain energy off of large crowds. So the vampire very often shows up, at least in one of the primary lines of most, world stars or rock stars, people that are on stage and have a lot of energy coming at them and actually thrive in those environments rather than get sick from them. If you put a priest or priestess out there over and over, that poor person would just eventually wither away. The empathy is just too open, and to have that much energy coming in just would drain some of these other types of soul lines. The vampire just becomes stronger and stronger because they feed on live energy coming in at them, and they can clean it up. So even if it's negative energy, they very often thrive, very often can withstand that. and become even more powerful and stronger. So there's different ways that the vampire can learn to work with energy input and output. And I believe they carry a very big role in our new earth and helping us. And we will go into more details on that at a future time. So the color is red, and true to form, most of the vampires I know are nocturnal. They prefer evening. They prefer moonlight. They prefer the darkness to bright sunny days. Now, that is not always the case. Of course, again, we're just generalizing. But the ones that I know tend to stay up late. They are available for their phone calls late at night. They do seem to thrive when those, the vibrations are very different at night, aren't they, than the daytime? And there's a different energy that comes with night. Vampires are another strength they have is they're quite brave and they're grounded. They're very grounded to earth. They're very sensual. They love all the sensual things. And they make very good, spies and warriors, people who are willing to go into the darkness. They kind of share this with some of our warrior shaman. And so they have a lot of strengths that some of the other more gentle or other inclinations in the other soul lines don't share with them. And so they have this courage to go into darkness and explore. And so they can actually be very helpful to those of us who do not have those inclinations. And they make very good protectors and other things. So I personally give a lot of credit to our vampire line, and I hope that as we discuss these lines in more and more detail, that I can help those of you who are interested understand them in a different way than maybe you do at this moment. Appreciate you, all of you listening. And so this is kind of the overview of the lower three. Now, what these lower three also have in common is they're a little more in tune with the physical world, because they're active. They're chakra centers that are holding so much of their spiritual DNA markers and come out in these energy centers of these lower three. They tend to be the more earthy of the energy centers. So we're in the vampire case, they love good foods, good wines, fabrics, deep dark colors, earthiness. This is very appealing to them, being the root chakra. Many might like gardening and just to be barefoot in the earth and the soil, and they're the kinds that take late night swims in the lakes and things like this, right? And then you have the artisan just a little bit above this, who is still very in tune with the physical world. Because when we think about it, the artisan isn't truly happy unless they can bring those inspiration, their dreams, their visions into this world. I mean, it's not entirely satisfying to the artisan to get this revelation about a new building to build and then not construct it. To receive the vision of a dance choreography that they want to put into play and then not be able to do it. So the artisan is also very earthy and very, very attuned to the importance of the higher visions making their way to earth in tangible forms. And then, of course, the healer, the third, at the solar plexus, they also share this tie to the physical, in that they're really working with the bodies. They're working with the containers that we all have. We all have different ones on Earth, whether it's an animal container, a plant container, or a humanoid. We are in a container in this dimension that isn't always functioning perfectly, but it's very physical and tangible. And that honored healer, that third center, again, is concerned with the physical containers, helping us make our bodies happy, helping us with the flow in a very 3D sense. And this is shared by these lower these lower chakras. And it can produce benefits. For example, those of us who are more practical very often have one of these three chakras adjusted very well, and the flow is very good. And we are, because of that energy being tied to physicality, we take steps to ensure that our physical world is working properly, and that leads to this kind of practical nature. And so that can have this benefit to have some energy flow. And of course, when you're completely balanced is wonderful. When all your chakras are flowing and circulating in a healthy way, that's what we're all aiming for. But in most of our bodies, we have some that are functioning better than others. So it can be a positive to have your strength largely tied to one of these lower three centers. Now, the negative can come also because sometimes if you are not honoring energy that is trying to manifest from one of these centers and you have blocked it, or you have had trauma that has blocked a particular center, then that can be the opposite of the positive happening as a result of one of these being dominant. And it can be where all your problems exist, maybe constant urinary tract infections, or problems with pregnancy, or problems in the stomach and intestines, or these things can show up in the physical plane if one of these chakra centers are blocked. Also in other ways, like if they're blocked, they could prevent you from acquiring the necessary money and material things you need to live happily and peacefully. So in different ways, if you're blocking an energy that you're actually born with and is actually meant to be expressed, and something has prevented that in one of these three lower chakras, that affects your physical plane so dramatically. So we will go into more of these. And again, the exercises and things for each soul line really will be specific to those needs that you have. And you can identify, hey, yeah, I have that going on and I'd like to correct that. Or you could say, yes, I'm very good at that. How can I use it? How can I do more of it? Right? So this is the purpose in understanding yourself so that you can bring the most into your own life and into the world, the things you were really intended to do, and feel on a daily basis, feel that your life has meaning and feel more fulfilled. This is the whole purpose. And again, this is just one small part of identifying and creating your magical persona. This is just the part dealing with soul lines. As I said before, I have found that when I look at different various forms of magic or even religions that I've been interested in my life's journey, I find that those things might change over the years, and I might develop an interest in something that I didn't have, 10 years previous. However, I find it's consistently, I want to use it in such a way that aligns with my primary soul line. So that keeps coming back around. I'm always finding, yes, oh yes, I love this new information. And then I take that information and I assimilate it, and then I want to use it in the way that feels most like myself, I'm most attuned to. And that always falls back to these soul lines. So I have found that these tend to hold up to some scrutiny over the years, and they do tend to be something you can utilize. Knowing about it can benefit you as life goes on for you. So, all right, I will close for now. I know this was a long one, and the next one will be long too, probably, because we're going to cover the other 4 soul lines in episode 20. And those will be the beloved priest and priestess, which is at the heart center, and the visionary messenger at the throat, and the mystical shaman, which is at the third eye, and the magi alchemist. Those are the 4 we'll cover in episode 20. So I hope you'll join me. In the meantime, please feel free to go to modernmasters.org and scroll down through that first page. At the bottom, you'll see the button for Immortal Soul Lines, and you can visit there and read all that's there. Well, thank you once again for being with me. I send the very best of energy to each and every one of you, and I'm so looking forward to us working together and, maybe choosing some days to align with each other and do specific things, and we'll just see how the energy builds up. It's going to be a fascinating adventure that we're taking together. Thank you again. I'll return shortly. Bye for now.